This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And thank you for joining us today. With me is Richard Fields, and from the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast, Leon Brathwaite. Gentlemen, Judicial Watch uncovered through a Freedom of Information Act request, I can talk today, that California government was in cahoots, I suppose. I'm not sure how to describe this one, to be honest.
In cahoots will work.
With social media and the tech companies to remove content that California government found objectionable, I guess is the best way to describe this. What do you guys think about this thing?
I think cahoots is a very weak word to describe what's going on. What's happening is California government and federal government, for that matter, is telling media platforms, you either take out what we don't like or look out for regulation that you won't like coming down the road. And the media companies are very happily saying, okay, sir, yes, sir, how high should I jump?
I mean, this is disturbing on so many levels, okay? I mean, when you really think about it, I'm sure it's illegal and probably illegal and unconstitutional. But what we have here going on is the government is censoring us indirectly through the social media, to these tech giants. So they are telling, they have their liability protection with Section 230, which protects them from all liability for things that individuals post on their platforms. But then they are turning around and deciding what content they were going to keep on their platforms. And go a step further, they are deciding with the help of the government what content they will keep on their platforms. This is disturbing, and I think somebody should be doing something about this immediately. Otherwise, this is going to continue and get worse.
It's one thing for a company to say, of their own free will, to decide, we don't want that type of discussion on our platform. I don't want that type of discussion on my server. You're perfectly, as an individual or as a company, you're perfectly reasonable in making that choice. But when the government says, we don't like this type of speech, and we think you shouldn't have that on your platform, and if you don't do anything about it, we may decide to put some regulations on you, or maybe not, or maybe just drag you in front of. Yeah, you're just going to do it just to not have to deal with the hassle, aren't you?
Yeah, no, I mean, what we have is really 1984, just coming in through the back door, or the front door, as it were. We've got a situation where, at the larger, more philosophical level, the antidote to bad speech or incorrect speech, or however you want to describe it, speech that is not socially productive, the antidote to bad speech is more speech, good speech, contradicting speech that points out the error of the original speaker's way. And let the free market of ideas, let the most cogent, most practical, most comprehensive, let the best speech win. Don't say we are going to ordain one line of speech, i.e. the political party line of either the red or the blue, to win. Let the speech win, which is the most persuasive.
Well, and that's just the point. Who are these wise angels that can make a determination as to what is good speech or bad speech, or what is misinformation, or what is not misinformation? Who are the wise angels can do this? So, but the point about all of this, though, these companies have liability protection against anything that people place on their platform. So why do they have to take content down? Why? They don't need to. They don't need to. Anyway, but that's a different issue.
Yeah, they don't need to, but they may need to in the future if they're regulated more drastically. And that's, of course, the implicit, unstated, but under the breath stated threat the government throws up to all of the social media companies. You either do it our way, say take down what we think you should take down, on your own, or we'll force you in another way later.
Well, and what's the strange thing is we sit here and we have the media, like the New York Times, helping the government enforce these kinds of censorship. Here we have a New York Times running an article about how Twitch is finding a financial lifeline for extremists. Again, now how to define an extremist, I don't know. New York Times just call them extremists, and they're somehow making money on Twitch, and that's a bad thing. And the fact is that our media, journalists, the people who should be arguing the most loudly against the government interfering this way, are sitting here leading the charge.
Well,
we have. Go ahead, Leon.
It's fine, Richard. Go ahead. It's fine.
You guys are being too nice to each other. Richard, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, what we have, I think it's emblematic that we call the Republicans the Reds and the Democrats the Blues. It's the Bloods and the Crips fighting over who gets to be in control of government. And it's really not an exaggeration by any stretch of the imagination. We really have two criminal gangs trying to be in control. And if you're not one of those criminal gangs, you're not going to get heard.
But the point is though, along with James's point, we have the media helping this process along. Now, anybody to the right of Bernie Sanders is somewhat is some kind of extremist. I mean, this QAnon people, I don't care much for them and some of their damn nonsense, but they have a right to speak like everybody else. And if they can raise money through whatever means they can, so be it. More power to them. But the media is
QAnon
trying
has a right to speak. AOC has a right to speak.
I'm sorry.
The Castros and the Castros now thankfully out of power in Cuba. They had a right to speak. They don't have a right to censor other people's speech, but they do have the right to speak. Marxists and Nazis all have a right to speak. And they all should be laughed off out of the public square. But everybody has the right to speak.
Right.
That's what the First Amendment is all about.
Back to the point that if QAnon could raise money to promote their free speech and their conspiratorial nonsense, let them do so. And let us see if we could replace that with good speech. Not people trying to ban them or with the media trying to demonize them and ban them at every turn and twist.
Well, danger festers in darkness. And so if you shove these people into the corners, into the dark corners of society, they not only do they kind of get to fester out of sight, they get to make a point. Say, hey, look, society's being unfair to us. Everybody else gets to speak. All these other radicals get to speak, but we can't. And so they actually end up with a point.
And would you rather have these idiots spouting their nonsense on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, or would you rather have them doing it on the dark web where they can pick up followers who buy into 100% of their nonsense? At least when they're subjected to the light of day, people can see this is what they're saying is BS, because other people will be able to point it out. If they're hidden away, nobody would, the New York Times or anybody else won't be able to point nonsense. There won't be any fact checkers, so to speak, to say, this is just silly. And that's why free speech works and censorship does not.
Well, the best disinfectant for bad speech is the light of good speech. It's the best disinfectant. And that is what we should allow to happen. Instead of, like you say, pushing them onto the dark web where every little clown could latch onto their damn nonsense. It's best we have it in the light of good speech where everybody can debate their issues and show them what idiots they are.
Yep. You cannot fix what you cannot see. Speaking about fixing something, the California Democrats have come out and decided to stay on message in opposing the Newsom recall. The Democrat Party they're not going to put up a candidate, apparently. They're just going to kind of cross their fingers and hope Newsom beats the recall. Unless there's some unknown Democrat who's throwing their name up on the ballot that I kind of... unless there's somebody doing a long shot. No serious Democrat's going to run. The party is kind of lined up behind Newsom, and we're going to see if the coastal elites show up to vote, I guess. I'm not sure what's going to happen on this thing.
Well, it's interesting. You've got a number of Republicans running. You've got Cox, who was soundly defeated in the last election, and what's his name? OC from ex-congressman from
Sacramento
area, and a couple of other big name guys.
Caitlyn Jenner is also running, and so is Kevin Falconer from San Diego.
Right, but there is actually an interesting wrinkle to this whole thing. The Republicans are obviously going to split the vote, and there's one Libertarian, Jeff Hewitt, who is a county supervisor, has won. He won the election to come in Riverside County after being the mayor of a little town in that county for a number of years, and he is the only Libertarian running. And he is a superlative campaigner, a guy who knows exactly how to go about actually winning a campaign, because he's demonstrated how to do it in one of the largest counties in the state. And it's the way as I understand it, the way the recall works is the candidate with the largest vote total doesn't have to be a majority. The largest plurality wins.
Yes.
How does it go if does not get a majority of the votes, or if a majority of the votes are in favor of the recall?
Yeah,
there's no runoff. There's no runoff.
Yeah, it's a two-stage thing. You vote to recall Newsom, and then you vote for who you want to replace him. It's a two-stage.
Right, and if the vote goes to recall Newsom, then whoever has the plurality of votes becomes governor. That's how Schwarzenegger was able to defeat Gray Davis. He didn't have a majority; he had a plurality, if I remember right. And Jeff could do the same thing.
Well, that will certainly shake up the political landscape here in California, and we need to be shooken up. There's no doubt about that. But it's kind of interesting that I find that the Democrats are lining up behind Newsom. They must be getting very confident that he will survive the first question, and that's a little bit disturbing, because I think that man is incompetent and corrupt too. See, quite frankly, I think that man should be replaced. Go ahead, Jason.
Well, Leon, there's something just before we came on the air. I saw an article pass on my newsfeed that the state employee unions have decided to donate $250,000 or something like that to the Newsom campaign.
No, I'm not surprised.
So these public employee unions are all on board. Well, of course they are, because they're going to they're hiring more and more public employees. These are not my grandfather's unions. I keep trying to tell people this. They're not my grandfather's unions. My grandfather's unions was a small union that worked for the people. These are big businesses. These public employee unions are big business. They're not what we think of as when we think of unions anymore. And speaking of thinking of unions, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled that truckers are no longer exempt from AB 5. So now here in California, your independent trucker now has to be an employee of somebody in order to drive it's all very confusing. And I think the confusion is probably worse than the actual what they're trying to accomplish, because it's so confusing. There's so many new rules. There's so many exemptions and loopholes, and you just throw up your hands and say, "Oh, forget it." Now, that's what I've done.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you take a look at all of labor law, it's all a way for government to get its heavy hand into what should be a mutual decision between an employer and an employee. That's what we should have. That's what a free market is all about. Two people deciding to exchange money for labor. And all of the labor laws are trying to either stack the deck in favor of unions or stack the deck in favor of employers, depending on the state that you're in. And it's all simply unnecessary and counterproductive. We need to have exactly zero labor laws. Let whoever wants to hire somebody go ahead and hire whoever they want to hire at whatever rate they want to hire them at. And if they hire the best people, they'll win in the competitive marketplace. If they make a mistake and, through prejudice or through other character defects, hire people who are less than optimum for the job involved, then they're going to fail in the marketplace.
Indeed. Well, I used to be an independent contractor. I was teaching at the time for a private university, and I really didn't need the government to come along and save me. I really don't need that. I mean, the relationship between me and my employer was a relationship between me and my employer, as was determined by the marketplace, as Richard rightfully said. But what is happening right now is the government are coming along and picking winners and losers. They're trying to define the relationship between employer and employee, and they want to tell us what is essential and what is not. Just look at what happened during the pandemic. Is the government laying its heavy hand, just like you said, Richard, laying its heavy hand all over us? Pretty soon they're going to be telling us what to do inside our homes. That's what's coming. If it have not already started.
Yeah, well,
It started. It's already started. Absolutely.
Oh, well, they're going to tell you what kind of you can't buy a gas stove anymore. Now you can only buy electric stoves.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, it's already started. Now I was an app-based gig worker up until last year. The pandemic started, and this whole AB5 thing completely changed not just the way your relationship with the people who you take money from, but it changed the culture of the business.
Right.
We used to be a tight-knit culture, tight-knit community where you would help each other. If you come across, like, you collect scooters, you get 6 scooters, you're collecting it, someone comes around, and you sit there and you talk, you help them out, and you didn't get mad if someone gets half your scooters or whatever. You didn't get mad, you talk, you find out, you trade information, you say, how in the heck did you get so many of those things in your car? Like, this one guy had 13 scooters in this little Geo Metro. How the heck did you get them in there? But nowadays, when you sit there and you talk to them, it's all selfishness. It's essentially like looking to a bunch of entry-level employees who really don't care. They're there to perform a job. They're not there for themselves. They're not there because they want to be. They're there because it's just a job. For those of us who used to do it, it was there because it was a lifestyle. It was what we wanted to do. We had built our whole lives around this independence that we got to negotiate with our employer, but not our employer, with the people we did tasks for every day. Some days I'd work for $20 an hour. Some days I'd work for $25. Some days I'd sit on my couch and say, you know what? I don't care how much you pay me. I'm not going to work today. And they couldn't do anything about it because I'm not an employee.
All right.
I work whichever days I want. If I want to take a vacation, I don't have to call and ask anybody and say, hey, can I take a vacation this week? No, I just go take a vacation.
Indeed. But you see, this is what happens. Whenever the government touches something, it always messes it up. Whether it's in the rideshare business, whether it's in the trucking industry, whether it's public education, whatever they do, they always have this one-size-fits-all mentality, and they always mess it up for everybody. It's just a disaster having them around. I wish they'll just stick to what the Constitution says that they should do. If they'll just stick to it, we'll be all right. But what we are seeing right now is the government becoming more and more powerful, and our liberties are shrinking more and more. And this is seriously problematic.
Yeah, I'd have less trouble giving the government some power if they could fill my freaking potholes well. Can we actually just do the basics first? If they can fill potholes, maybe I can trust them to do a vaccine rollout. But they can't fill potholes.
Without government, who would build the roads? Well, maybe they should start with taking care of the roads and stop right there.
Well, who's the first person to build the mountain road? It wasn't the government. It was the logging companies. True. And the governments came through later and improved those roads. That's how the government built the mountain roads. So logging companies will build roads. The factory owners will build roads. The mall owner will build roads. The developer of the neighborhood will build roads. You can't build a factory without first building a road. You can't do it. Or you have to get everything as 4-wheel drive, and you don't need roads. It's one of the two. But speaking of government incompetence, the U.S. is about to run out of adults who are eager to get the to get the vaccine. Now, I got mine this week. Last Wednesday. I've been sleeping ever since, but that's kind of my biggest side effect of the vaccine was I just flipping tired for 4 days.
The
Yeah,
vaccine that
I
made you
got my
sleepy.
vaccines
Which
back
vaccine did
in
you get?
I got the Johnson & Johnson one.
Oh, okay.
single dose. Okay. Yeah, I got mine back in January and February, Pfizer, and the most I got out of it was a sore arm for a day or so. And there is a legitimate point to be made that they have not gone through all of the FDA tests that would normally happen with a new drug, and that's actually a good thing. It's actually a good thing. It lets the marketplace figure out whether a vaccine is viable rather than a bunch of eggheads sitting on a panel in Washington, D.C. And so far, it's turned out that the vaccine, with a few very rare exceptions, has been a good thing. And
Yes.
and I think most people have enough sense to get the vaccine if they feel like they are at risk if they get the coronavirus. Now, there's a lot of people that are simply not at risk getting the coronavirus. Essentially, anybody under the age, I don't know, 30, something like that, they're just
Yeah.
going to get the symptoms of a mild case of the flu. They don't really need to get the virus. Or the vaccine. They can get the immunity from having the disease, and the
Yes.
disease is not going to be much worse than the vaccine. So, if people don't want to get the vaccine and they're willing to take that risk, and they're healthy enough so that risk is not unduly bad, I say let them go for it. You can get herd immunity two ways, either through the vaccine or through natural immunity by
Exactly.
having contracted the virus itself.
And this was one of the mischaracterizations, I think, in that article that was posted with this topic, James, in the sense that they seem to be focusing more. They did mention the possibility of gaining some herd immunity through natural immunity, but and the percentages they lay out there and that kind of stuff did not consider the fact that people are getting naturally immune from having the disease. And a lot of people are walking around who don't even know that they have the disease. And there was a big story a little while ago in Minnesota. They had to adjust their numbers by some percentage because there are a lot of people who have the disease and don't know that they do. And as a result, they will have the immunity. And that article does not consider that. So this thing about not reaching herd immunity, I'm not sure that is true. I think we will get there. All right, we are not there as yet because a lot of people haven't been fully vaccinated. I have just had one. I've had the Moderna, but I've only had one dose. I will have the next one next week sometime. But we will get to herd immunity sooner or later. I mean, and there are a lot of people I know quite a few people who have had the coronavirus and they will not be vaccinated because they are naturally immune. But so I'm not scared about this herd immunity thing. I think we'll get there. I mean, maybe not as fast as I would like to see, but I think we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, I think. Well, for those of us who grew up in the '80s, some of us. We lost Richard. Some of us who grew up in the '80s, we tried lots of experimental drugs, and trying another one here is probably shouldn't be. We probably shouldn't be having too much of a complaint about trying an experimental vaccine when
Yes.
when all the experimental drugs we took back 30 years ago. Yeah, I'm just saying that I did it to make my mother happy. I was kind of ambivalent about the whole thing. It's like my mother's going to be happy, and whatever,
Yes.
it's fine. I wasn't worried one way or the other, but the media and the government does seem to have this mission focused. It's
Yes.
this target fixation. Whether it's
Yes.
that the herd, they don't seem to look at the wider perspective.
Right.
They don't. It's like when you're talking about herd immunity, they only think of it in terms of vaccine. They don't talk about how many people have had the virus, how long does the natural immunity last, because we don't actually know these questions yet.
True.
So they don't. But because we don't know them, they don't talk about them. But we don't know these questions on the vaccines either. But yet they're making the assumptions on the vaccines. And
Absolutely.
so it's this strange dichotomy, I guess, that the media and the government has, is where they're so focused, narrow focused on the virus and the vaccine that they forget about the economic damage, the psychological damage, and
Well,
the natural immunities. They kind of lost
this
their.
whole
Well,
lockdown,
yeah,
this whole
yeah.
lockdown happened. I'm sorry, Richard, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what you're looking at is a bunch of epidemiologists who are highly trained in their field and have exactly no training in economics, no training in any other disciplines other than their own, making decisions for the entire population and forgetting about doing trade-offs. And when they are proven wrong, as they have been, just look at the of infection in Texas versus California, versus
Yes.
none, or Florida or Sweden,
Florida,
Guam.
yes.
And the evidence is that they were wrong. They're not going to admit that they're wrong. They're just going to say, well, we didn't lock down quite enough. It's sort of like, whenever the government fails, it's never because they did the wrong things, because they didn't do enough of the wrong thing. Throw more money at it and you'll fix it. Well, not when you're throwing money at something that's actually detrimental to your cause. And that's what the government is doing, and pretty much always does. You never see a government program go away. If it doesn't work, it's because they weren't spending enough money. That's what the experts in that particular field will always argue, and it always has been that way, and it always will be. That's why the government should be in fewer and fewer things, so that free market owners who will fail if they get the answer wrong can go ahead and fail and let somebody else come in and do it right.
Yes.
Yeah, I find it interesting that the believers in big government, they hold the free market. Well, they call it capitalism, but it's just the free market. They hold the free market to a standard that the free market doesn't hold itself to. The free market never says it's going to be perfect. They actually really admit they're going to have failures. The government, they sit here and they promise utopia. They continually fail, but somehow they're never responsible. Somehow the free market is responsible for something they never promised, and yet the government is never responsible for something they do promise. It's
of
like
course.
We live in bizarro world.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that these people, like some of these programs, and Richard is right, some of these programs, they come into existence, they fail, they produce disasters, but still, they're still on the books and they're still being funded. Our tax dollars are still paying for it. And they keep going on and on.
Well, our program is no longer funded. We are out of time. Thank you all for joining us here on Libertarian Counterpoint. You can catch us here next week. Join us at libertariancounterpoint.com and all your favorite social media outlets. And please remember, from all of us here at Libertarian Counterpoint, to love everybody.
Stay free.